liberté d'expression ne devrait pas se limiter aux idées qui nous conviennent. Elle signifie qu'il faut se battre pour permettre à ceux avec lesquels on est en désaccord d'avoir le droit d'exprimer leurs opinions. Le cyberespace est un moyen
Die Grenzen der Meinungsfreiheit und des sozialen Miteinanders werden allerdings dann überschritten, wenn die Kommentare den Grad der Hassreden erreichen. Moral, Ethik und Nächstenliebe werden schnell vergessen, um die Person eines anderen zu diskreditieren, bloßzustellen und verbal zu verletzen. Die Anonymität im Internet
es un derecho esencial que hace posible que nuestro mensaje llegue a todo el mundo de manera instantánea.
Laten we er samen voor zorgen dat cyberpesten stopt.
Hello, Start FM and the European Law Students Association listeners. First of all, special thanks from ELSA Lithuania to Start FM for helping us with our project and being a co-host for this live podcast dedicated to ELSA Day. Every year, on the last Wednesday of November, the entire ELSA network of 44 countries is working together on realization of a unique human rights forum to discuss international and European standards of protection and implementation of human rights. The 8th edition of the ELSA Day focuses on freedom of expression online. Therefore, it's time to introduce our guests. Our first guest is Paulius Serapinas, Program Coordinator of the Lithuanian Youth Organizations Council, Board Member of the Lithuanian-Swedish Cooperation Fund, Member of the Lithuanian Scouts, and also a student at the Institute of International Relations and Political Science. Hi, Paulius.
Hello, everyone.
Our second very special guest is Ms. Eglė Kuktaraitė, journalist, LGBTQIA+ rights activist, who works as a communication manager at the National Gay League. Hi, Eglė.
Hi.
And my name is Raminta. I will be the moderator of our today's podcast. To begin with, there is no doubt that freedom of expression is one of the most fundamental rights stated not only in international conventions such as European Convention of Human Rights and declarations, but also in national constitutions. However, these national and international regulations also state that freedom of expression is not absolute. The restrictions for this right may be set by law for the purpose of protection of the individuals and public interests. Article 25 of the Constitution of the Republic of Lithuania also states that freedom to express convictions and to impart information shall be incompatible with criminal actions. Incitement to national, racial, religious, or social hatred, incitement to violence or to discrimination, as well as defamation and disinformation. As the majority of our everyday communication is held online, there is no surprise that different opinions towards social processes, as well as actions of discrimination, bullying, and even hate speech, are transferred to social media. Despite the regulation of our constitution, according to data of June 2019, Lithuanian prosecutors have opened about 150 investigations over slander and about 20 over incitement to hatred. In most cases, they occur online. What is the current status quo in Lithuania and other countries? Where is this thin line between proper freedom of expression and morally and lawfully not allowed behavior? Are there any measures to prevent crossing this line? This and more are the main topics of our podcast today. So let's move on to our first question, and I'll direct this to Eglė. What is your opinion about freedom of expression on the internet in Lithuania? And maybe you have some examples on the differences between Lithuania and other foreign countries.
Well, we have been monitoring hate speech online. It's very difficult to generalize on this, but when you compare Lithuania to other Western countries, it's obvious that we are just learning to express our thoughts freely. And some people don't take into account that freedom of speech is limited when it comes to hate speech and discrimination against some groups that are protected in Lithuania.
Paulius, I know that you have recently came back from UNESCO, so UNESCO conference. So you maybe have some insights on freedom of speech situation in other countries, and of course compared to Lithuania.
Talking about Lithuania, well, I think that we are in a phenomenal country comparing to other countries because I'm studying political science, and we had in the first year we had a lot of political scientists who compared like economics to social life and organizations, And also with that, it came the freedom of expression on the internet, on the, I don't know, in the social area and so on. So when comparing to that classical status quo that political scientist says that in those countries where economics are good, where people have satisfaction of their well-being and so on, they have more freedom of expression. What I see, I haven't done any research in Lithuania, and I haven't, I don't know any kind of statistical data what kind of freedom of expression status quo in Lithuania are now. But what I see from my social bubble, it's I see that people are really expressing themselves in the social media, especially in Lithuania and especially in those urban areas and those younger people. Comparing to other countries, well, I also always like to compare Scandinavian countries or Nordic countries, and I think that they have a lot of I don't know platforms and programs that helps to share their expression on social networks and social area, and as well with that they have a lot of prevention programs and so on. So I think that the situation of freedom of expression in other countries might be better, but we don't need to be sad about Lithuania, because I think people really express their thoughts and opinion in social media, and especially in internet.
Thank you. Agla, maybe you disagree with the thoughts that Polis has just shared with us.
Well, I've been monitoring hate speech comments based on sexual orientation, which are prohibited in Lithuania, and what I see is that those comments are not made by people in biggest Lithuanian cities. These comments are made by probably mostly older people in smaller towns who have plenty of time to comment, because people who have jobs and lives, they don't usually comment on something that is not very relevant to them. So it's I wouldn't say that there is specific portrait of a person who would write this comment. It's also men, women, mostly of older age, but also in their 30s. So it's very complex issue in Lithuania, I think.
As our topic today is freedom of speech online, so in your personal or maybe from your organizational experience, which are the biggest threats that you see in growing significance of social networks impact on our society, and how does this may transform freedom of speech, or maybe it already had transformed? So, Paulus.
So as I said before, I don't know, it might be because we're all living in different social bubbles and we see different information also in the internet. I recognize that when there was like elections in Lithuania, because I saw how many people was had different opinions about different candidates, and how my social bubble and my relatives spoke about that in the social media. So, but overall, I think that yes, as you said about hate speech in Lithuania, about those comments and LGBTQ plus community about them and so on. And that's not only one example. We have a lot of hate speech, not only all about this social group, about all social groups, because everyone wants to express their opinion. So I believe that needs to be like control in some way, but it not needs to be like, I don't know, very strict policy, because firstly we need to educate people how to act on those social network on the internet, and after that it might be natural that people don't use hate speech so much. So the biggest threat may be that I don't know, cyber attacking, also hate speech and fake news and other things. So, but it's not. It's natural now for people in Lithuania and I think all in other countries, but we can't just ban freedom of speech now. We need to educate people. I don't know. Create new prevention programs that educates people how to act on those social networks.
Thank you. Agle, one more question for you. It's quite often that our society do not distinct the hate speech, the discrimination, discriminatory comments, and so on. Maybe you can just elaborate on that. What are the main signs of identifying harmful content on the internet and the gray area content? How to distinguish where is just bullying and where is the hate speech? Maybe we do not need any distinguish on that. Any separation. So what is your opinion or maybe practical insights?
Okay, so firstly we have to say that illegal comments are illegal on there are grounds on criminal code, and so incitement of hatred is basically incitement to kill, to do something harmful for these people. So if a person writes a comment and says, I don't like gays are bad, it's his opinion. Of course, it might offend LGBT community, but it's not a hate speech comment. So what we do, we basically collect all these comments who are inciting hatred and provoking some violent acts, and you would be surprised how many of such comments there are on internet. We do monitoring in cycles. We do monitoring once a year. It lasts for 1 month. And currently I am doing it until December 10th, and I already have 500 comments that are inciting hatred. It's very easy to report for social media users, mainly Facebook, because Lithuanians mostly express their views on Facebook. It's a Lithuanian phenomenon. In Europe, people use Twitter and Instagram as well, but we haven't seen any hate speech comments on these platforms yet. So it's a very useful tool because there are so many hate speech comments online. I would invite every user to, when they see a hate speech comment, to report it, because there's so many that we are unable to find all these comments. They just erupt every time you open some kind of post. So basically, nobody will take away the freedom of speech. Hate speech is not something that can exist on the internet, and IT companies are doing their best to ensure that these hate speech comments are deleted as soon as possible, because they realize that for example, Facebook should be a place where all users should feel that they are welcome to be there and to express themselves. So it's very important.
And in your opinion, should a government take part in improving safety online, or maybe it should be left to users to be conscious and report inappropriate content, as you just have mentioned?
Of course, the government should be involved, but this process is very slow, and I have not seen any positive events taking place concerning the governmental proposals or something that would help the IT companies. Because before, the comments used to be posted on the main portals in Lithuania, and now most of these portals also post on Facebook. So it seems like all these hate speech comments are left for IT platforms and portals, and they have not so many people that can go through these comments. So unless we all contribute to flagging these illegal comments and contents, then nothing will change, I think.
Paulus, you mentioned that the main treat for this problem should be education.
Mhm.
What is your opinion on the government taking part in improving safety online?
So I think that the government is the main body who can do that. Also with the non-governmental organizations and other institutions, or maybe private sector, but government, we have the Ministry of Education, Sports, and Science. So, and in that ministry we have the schools department, and a lot of schools have a lot of young people. So I think that the scheme is very known for everyone. And the main thing, how can we educate people, is via schools and via education. So I think that now what kind of programs now we have in schools for young people, it's not well known for everyone. It might be a little bit, I don't know, just for the program, just for making the checkbox, because it's not. I think that the school students are not educated well with freedom of expression in the internet, or hate speech, and so on. Because it's kind of now it's like an curricular course in school. It's not like the main thing what they need to be educated as well with maths, Lithuanian language, English, and so on. So because the government needs to create programs as well with the private sector and NGOs that helps to prevent hate speech on the internet. And we have a lot of good examples. And I was at a UNESCO general conference. The Estonian president sat next to me, and she said an amazing thought about how to prevent hate speech, how to make freedom of expression the more better status quo for freedom of expression, just to erasing anonymous comments, anonymous expressions, and so on. Make it all very clear on the internet, because in that kind of way we could see the person's face. And I know that in Facebook it's kind of a platform where you see the person's face, but I think that we have a lot of other platforms where people expressing their thoughts in anonymous way. So I think that thought was really good, and I kind of see the programs who from the government as well with the private sector and NGOs in schools, universities, and so on. But those programs need to be focused not only about prevention, but also about that you need to express your opinion clearer in internet and more open.
You know, it's an interesting thought, because the European Court of Human Rights has recently ruled that every person shall have the right to express his or her comments anonymously.
Yeah.
So, Agla, maybe you have some insights on whether the comments shall be anonymously, how to prevent these anonymous comments and the content that may discriminate people by these comments.
Well, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to have anonymous comments, but anyway, whether it's anonymous or non-anonymous, hate speech is hate speech, and young people read all these comments. Imagine if you are LGBT young person and you click on a post on LGBT issues, and you see that people are saying that you should be burned or hanged, or where is Hitler. So I'm not so very positive when it comes to government. We should note that there is no mandatory teaching at schools about LGBT issues. So basically, people have no idea about LGBT peoples, and they comment whatever they have in mind, whatever opinions they have created, because there's this vacuum of information on LGBT issues in schools, and there is a high percentage of bullying in school, which is related to LGBT issues. And I think hate speech and bullying are highly connected, because they signal that we don't understand how it's important to support LGBT young people. And I think it comes from our sad past, when nobody talked about homosexuality, and still it's kind of taboo in schools. We also have this law on this anti-gay propaganda law, which is effectively in place, although it hasn't been enforced since in 3 years. But people know that it exists, that speaking about LGBT issues is not okay, and especially with young children. So we see high rates of bullying. We see this hate speech spread and growing, and I don't think that government is doing anything in this area. I haven't heard of any governmental ideas on how to counter hate speech online. On Facebook, I know that there's journalist ethics office, and they are also flagging some comments, but that's it.
I have one more thought about the government and what Agla said about hate speech and so on, and you mentioned Soviet times, so I'm really I like to talk about that very much. And when comparing freedom of speech and now what we have, the status quo now in Lithuania in internet and in the social networks and so on, so I think people expressing their thoughts like really really much, and that is a consequence of the Soviet Union things, because when you had I don't know, it's just a comparison with I don't know, with an animal who is in cage for 50 years, and then you just allow him to escape that cage, and now he has everything. He can do everything. He can express his thoughts. He can travel everywhere and so on. So it's really hard for Lithuanian society to manage all this everything. Because it's really hard to be in that place when you really think about that, think about the consequences, what your I don't know, what your actions, what the consequences of your actions is, and so on. So yes, we had a lot of problems in Soviet Union, and especially with LGBTQI community plus and so on, and a lot of other social groups that also haven't been thought about. But I think the main thing is that people need to learn more Also, we need time that people could understand the consequences of their actions, and the government. I think that they're doing something, but it's not well known and it's not well recognized in the social area, in the public area, because well, if they will start doing a lot of things, people might don't understand that, and they will say that they're banning our freedom of expression, because it's really hard to explain where is hate speech and where is freedom of expression and only my opinion. I think for most of people, because they think that freedom of expression is also a hate speech because that's how you express your opinion. So it's just my thought about the government and about Soviet Union.
And do you think that other post-Soviet countries have the same problem as Lithuania?
I think yes. I think that the situation is like really common in all of those countries. It might be different situation in Estonia, I think, because yes, they have a almost fully digital community, and the people were familiar with the internet and digital services and so on earlier than in Lithuania, and that might be the good example for us. But I think in other countries they have in other post-Soviet countries they have the same situation as in Lithuania.
Let's talk about a little bit about this topic from the not so old historical perspective. Statistics show that in 2012, out of 263 recorded crimes of hate speech, 181 were related to the incitement of anti-Semitism and hate speech against various nationalities or ethnic groups. 13 recorded crimes were related to hate speech against the black race or its representatives, 12 such crimes in 2011, and 47 recorded crimes to hate speech against LGBT persons, 208 such crimes in 2011. So, Agla, in your opinion, has this tendency to hate speech in Lithuania, mainly targeting minorities, changed or not over the past 7 years?
I think these numbers show absolutely nothing, because there's latency in these crimes. They go underreported. So the fact that somebody had some time and piled some applications to the court says that there are NGOs working in this area and they submitted complaints. I am sure that these numbers represent absolutely nothing, because reality is that, as I said, in a few weeks I recorded 500 illegal hate speech comments. If I would go to police with these comments, numbers would be different. The numbers are so huge on social media that I don't know how to comment this data. It's just a sign of underreporting of these comments.
Both of you, in one way or another, have been in non-government organizations activities, involved in these activities. So what is your personal opinion on the NGOs' impact on elaborating on this topic, and how NGOs may help to prevent the hate speech and to inform the society about how to properly use freedom of speech? Paulius.
So Lithuanian Youth Council, I work there as a program coordinator. We have 68 youth organizations. We work with various youth policy topics and spheres. But I think that we also talk about hate speech and freedom of expression and social networks, and how to act on that, and how to act it freely, and that the freedom of expression also is one of the main topics that we talk when we are talking about social networks and so on. because the social networks and internet is the main tool how we elaborate, communicate, and partnership with other organizations and young people in our organization. So I think that we don't have concrete tools that records like hate speech comments and so on, because we have different I don't know we specialize in different topics and more of representing young people and so on, because we don't do that much physical activities and managing and creating tools that search for hate speech in internet. But what we can do is to talk with those young people, create discussions with decision makers, with private sector, with public people that works with that, and to make a dialogue with young people and decision makers or private sector, and try to raise more questions on how we can elaborate with each other, how can we make a difference, and how can we kind of change the status quo what's now happening in Lithuania. About other NGOs, as Agla said, she as well is reporting, as well as searching for those hate speech comments, and that's really good. I think that there is more organizations who have such a profile that do this kind of things in internet and so on. But there's different NGOs, as I said. One of those, some NGOs just talk about that and try to educate young people or society via creating a dialogue with different levels. And other NGOs just they're doing the physical things. They are creating tools. They are coordinating platforms that helps to search for hate speech in internet. So it's good that we have, but they're not elaborating, I think, with each other, and they are not partnership enough. There's not a lot of partnership with those organizations.
We speak mainly about educating young people and school students, but as Agla have mentioned, the majority of these comments come from rural areas, from people who do not have enough activities in their lives. So, Agla, in your opinion, maybe non-government organizations' activities may be one of the key tools to how to educate these people, how to reach them, and prevent the hate speech.
Well, we have been traveling throughout all Lithuanian cities with an exhibition that included pictures of socially vulnerable groups. It's been quite a journey. Some cities would not allow to demonstrate pictures from the Baltic Pride, but we do what we can do. But when it comes to our work on hate crimes and hate speech, we have been doing it for at least 10 years. We had a lot of European Commission projects on this field. We have been collaborating with Lithuanian police. And I don't think I have monopoly on reporting Facebook comments. I think the most important issue is that people don't realize that everyone can report a comment when they see it on Facebook. So the tool is already there for everyone to use. So we try to educate people that there is such a possibility. We also write articles and raise awareness on hate speech issues. So I think this problem is mainly left for the non-governmental organizations, but at least European Commission recognizes this as a huge problem, and we were approached by them, and we are collaborating with European Commission and social media, so Facebook, Google, Instagram, and other media, to make these social media websites more welcoming to everyone.
You have mentioned the socially vulnerable groups, and in our media, we often talk about LGBT people, but what are other groups that are targeted by the hate speech and these discriminating comments?
Well, these groups are enshrined in equal treatment law in Lithuania, so it's people with disability. Basically, discrimination is prohibited on disability, gender, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and there are some other grounds.
Moving from this point, cultural values feed off freedom of expression. And Paulus, do you think that freedom to express yourself on the internet helps our culture grow? Or do the negative outcomes, as we have discussed already, created by vast freedom of expression outweigh the positive ones?
I think that it actually helps because we see different opinions and we don't see the only one opinion. And especially, I don't know, when comparing election period, if we are not having that opportunity to have social networks and the advertisement of politicians and political campaigns, we don't have kind of opportunity to choose, and we don't see those people in real life, in live. So social networks and internet, and of course freedom of expression helps to have more different profiles of different people, to know more of them, to know what they're thinking about different topics, and that's how we can choose the best candidate to be in our government, parliament, or maybe president. And so all of this, I think it also helps our culture to grow, because not only about politicians, but also about our friends, relatives, and so on. We also see what kind of things they are thinking about. We can also choose our friends in kind of what they're thinking, because I think it's kind of when talking about social groups and when comparing different ages and centuries. So I think that the 21st century has the most social groups, because we have vegans, we have LGBTQ community, we have it's funny, but we have Android versus iPhone people, and we have different social groups, and we have a threat for discrimination, because you can be I don't know, Afro-American, LGBTQ, Jew, then I don't know, you can have different religion and so on. So you only one person have different segments of each social group. So we have different cultural values in each social group, different understanding of the world might be, and it's really hard to just I don't know, to choose. But it's good, because that's how we explain and express our thoughts and opinion in social networks, in internet, in social area, and that's how we can choose what we want to be. And I think it helps to our culture to grow when it's not hate speech. But we can also choose persons by if they're expressing their thoughts via hate speech and so on. So that's just my opinion.
Agla, what are your thoughts on the cultural values formed by freedom of expression? And Poles have already mentioned the countries that Lithuania may follow their lead, Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries. Maybe you have some good examples of foreign countries in this context.
Well, I don't have specific country in mind, but of course we have a long way till we can be compared to Western countries that had 100 years of independence, and they moved on with freedom of speech and hate speech. They are much more advanced than we are. But I think generally internet is very helpful for people to meet and to share their ideas. For example, even for LGBT community, before internet, there were some newspapers, some ads where you can write your postal address and receive some letter. And now there's a way for community to always be together, to connect, to know each other, to relate, to share. And I think it's a wonderful tool. And also there's this aspect of transparency, and now we can see what is behind these comments. Of course, some profiles are fake, but most comments you can see who is writing what.
So for the closing thoughts, in your opinion, what is more important? Safe but restricted internet, or free but full of threats? And is it even possible to have both? In our day society, and maybe eventually society must choose. What is more important, safety or freedom? And just closing thoughts from everything we've discussed today. So maybe Agla, you can start.
Of course, the internet must be safe. If it wouldn't be restricted at all, we would see people killing each other on the internet. We would see harmful things. We would see pedophilia and pornography on the internet. So there are tools to make internet safe and free. There are people on each social platform who are making sure that internet is safe for everyone to use. Of course, there are some things left behind, and that's why there are some restrictions on the age for younger people. It might be safer not to use these social media sites for children. There are some positive thoughts about internet. I'm seeing, as I'm doing this monitoring job for a few years, I already noticed that there are people who are reporting as well, and I think it's a very nice tool to educate people as well who have no idea what they have done, and they receive this notification that they breached community values, and if they continue to breach them, they will be blocked. They would be out of Facebook for a month, and then maybe they will lose their account. So I think it's much worse punishment than some kind of small amount to be paid for this comment.
And Paul, your last thoughts.
So I think that the main thing about internet and answering to this question that you have is that internet don't have walls. So it's actually impossible to have safe and free internet now. And I know that it's not comparable, but when you compare, I don't know, internet with roads, we have also road rules that everyone follows, and that's how we try to manage to lower the accidents in the roads. But I think that those rules, laws, and so on is already graded in about internet, and so we have the situation now that those rules and laws are not working well, that we will have that we could have safe and free internet. And I think it's impossible because rules, they can be people are not followed by rules, and that's why we need to raise critical thinking, raise prevention programs, different platforms that educates people how to act, how to elaborate on internet, and so on. That's the only way, I think, now, because if we make a lot of rules, if we ban a lot of, I don't know, if we ban a freedom of expression, it's not going to be free, and some might be use that also, and it's not going to be safe. So I don't know. Yeah.
So, as our time has run out, I want to thank both of you for your time and the insights you shared with our listeners today on this difficult as well as greatly important matter. I'm sure that we can agree that on the conclusion that each of us has to take the responsibility of the right use of freedom of expression. We hope that you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for listening. Have a nice ELSA day.